So good morning if you've just joined us. Welcome to another one of our free webinars. So today we're going to be looking at conflict confidence. So I'll start off just with a couple of bits of housekeeping, not really a lot to worry about this morning. You just need to sit back and relax. Now we will ask for some participation in the chat. So it would be good to hear from you throughout the session. So Jo and myself want to keep it as interactive as possible. So we will ask you some questions. So feel free to ask us questions as well. Now you might have noticed that all your cameras are off and your mics are muted as well, which is perfectly normal. So as I said, please just use the chat if there's anything we say that you don't understand or you have any questions at all. And I think we've got a little poll question in there for you to answer as well. So let's see what we're going to be looking at today then. So to start us off, we'll first of all look at understanding what conflict is. Then we'll look at the different types of handling modes. So we all have a natural style, which we go towards. Now you might know that, you might not, but you will get a chance to do a self-assessment as well, where you'll be able to discover what your style is too. Then we'll look at challenging conversations and really how we start to deal with conflict and how we get that positive outcome. So we'll take you through some of that and look at how we can have that assertive communication as well. So to get us started then, I'm going to ask you a question. So what is your biggest challenge when it comes to conflict and those difficult conversations? So what's your biggest challenges? Pop in the chat for me. And I see a few people are just joining us, so I'm just going to let a few more people in. So if you have just joined us, welcome, don't worry, you've not missed anything yet. I've just asked a question in the chat there. So what I'm looking for is, what are your biggest challenges when it comes to conflict and those difficult conversations? Yeah, Ashley, saying the right thing, or that fear of not saying the right thing. Yeah, and that could, as you say, lead to those negative outcomes. Yep, I can relate to that, Rachel, not wanting to upset people. Yeah, the other end. And that can be hard, can't it, Jo, when you're at the other end and you don't know how someone's going to react either.
Absolutely, absolutely. And worrying about how that's impacting their feelings. Finding the balance between transparency and honesty and delivering those hard messages that sometimes people don't want to hear. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can be honest, but you don't want to be brutally honest, do you? I think it is a very fine line, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then it can absolutely impact how someone feels. And if it's not communicated, as you said, Nadine, that poor communication can really impact someone else. Yeah, and Edmund saying getting that idea across correctly. So there's lots of different things there, and there's one for me, Louisa, remembering what you want to get across as well. My memory's not what it used to be, so that can be a problem as well.
Totally related.
So lots of different things, and definitely we're going to delve into these in more detail and how we can. And then Sophie, yeah, absolutely, cultural differences and just being respectful. I think that's the starting point, and how we can actually listen before we speak. I was always told 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So taking that time to listen first of all. So keep popping them in the chat for me while we're going through it. It'd be great to hear what challenges you do have when it comes to those difficult conversations and conflict. So I'll hand over to you, Jo.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's start to understand what we mean by conflict. Good place to start. So again, jump on the chat. What do we understand conflict to mean? What is conflict? Put your ideas in the chat for me. And I'm saying, yeah, disagreement, 2 different ideas. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, lots of you saying a disagreement or a difference of opinion, 2 different ideas. a tug of war sometimes, Sophie,
Oh.
absolutely.
Like that one.
Yeah, yeah. Mismatch between expectations and reality, Elizabeth saying. Yeah, conflict is basically just a difference between us, isn't it? Based on our differing interests, values, as Karim's saying there, our different opinions, a different way we possess, the different way we see a problem, the different knowledge that we have, different views. So yeah, conflict is very simply just a difference between us. And I guess a different question, is it good or is it bad? Is conflict good or is it bad? What do we think? Because conflict as a word sounds bad, doesn't it? It sounds negative.
Oh, both.
Yeah,
Something in the fence there.
can be both. It can be both.
I love that for Ashley. Good in more cases than we might think. Yeah, absolutely.
And Nadine saying it depends. Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately conflict is healthy, just as Sophie's saying there. But it does definitely depend on how it's managed, right? It depends on how that conflict goes and how we manage it, how the other person manages it, how it's being dealt with depends on whether it's healthy or not. But conflict is essential. A world without conflict would look very, very strange. It would seem happy on the outside, maybe, but it might kind of house conflicting opinions that we're not ready to voice or we're not able to voice. And over time, if that's not dealt with in a healthy way, then that can lead to kind of bigger problems further down the line. So if conflict isn't managed correctly and healthily, then it can bubble under the surface and lead to deeper issues going forward. So conflict is an essential part of life, not just at work, but outside of work as well. So let's have a look at what conflict stages are, if you like. So I guess ideally we would love all of our relationships, whether that's work or home, to be in this kind of harmonious state where everyone's happy and things are working out really, really well. But inevitably along comes something, and it can be something really small, like we said, a difference of opinion, a clash of personalities, difference of values, not being heard or being disrespected in some way. Little things can nudge us into this sort of unhappiness quadrant. And ultimately, if we deal with that on its face value and kind of flush that out into the open, then we can return to harmony pretty quickly. As I said, if we leave it though, it might bubble under the surface and it might lead to conflict. Or sometimes if there are larger things at stake, larger differences in opinions, then that can also lead us into a conflicting state at work. And I think the critical thing here is any of those points, unhappiness or conflict, we've got to deal with it in the right way. Healthy conflict is good. So if we deal with it in the right way, we tackle it and listen to other people's opinions, but also happily assert our own, then we can get ourselves back to harmony quickly, calmly, with no kind of big deal. If we leave it, however, it's going to carry on bubbling under the surface even more, and we might end up in this state that we've called war. And that's very difficult to come back from. So at that point, relationships are breaking down. Negativity is really festering under the surface. And that's very, very hard to come back from. So the critical thing here is any little things that trigger this unhappiness or move us away from harmony, any conflict that we experience, the key here is dealing with it openly, dealing with it quickly, and moving back to that harmony.
Thanks, Jo. So for me, when we think about conflict, we think about emotions. So for me, it's all about identifying those emotions. Now, whether that be within ourselves or others, it's how we relate to others and how we communicate our feelings. Now, to understand emotional intelligence and how everything's all linked together, we need to understand the brain. Now, we're not going to go a deep dive into this today. We're just going to think about a simple model that's based on the book The Chimp Paradox by Dr. Steve Peters. Don't know if you've heard of it, but I really would recommend it if you haven't read
One
it.
of my favorites.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm on his next book, The Pathway Through the Jungle, which is even more interesting. So for me, our human brain is that logical, rational brain. And that's where we think about our solutions to our problems and use sound reasoning. Now, we'd like to think that all our decisions and actions are based on this. Now, when we think about the chimp side, that's the emotional brain, the prehistoric, the primal brain. So that's what goes back to that fight or flight principle. Now, all our events and situations we are faced with, they're filtered through here first. And sometimes we make decisions purely based on emotion. And sometimes you maybe ask yourself, oh, why did I do that? Why did I react like that? Now, unfortunately for us, that chimp brain's 5 times stronger, 5 seconds faster than the human brain. So that's when we're stressed. We tend to say, count to 10, take a breath. And it's all about allowing that human brain a chance to catch up. Because if we don't, that's when we start to act in impulse and you might start to regret what you've said. Now, if we really think about that fight or flight, it did serve us well in time gone by, but not so much now. And we're unable to operate in that human brain if we're within that emotional chimp side. Now, when people get stressed, they quite often struggle to think clearly or problem solve. And that's why. So what things then tend to trigger your emotions? So think about in work then. So what I'd like to do for you to do now is pop in the chat for me. What work setting things are triggering your emotions?
Just
Now,
what you're doing.
question for Edmund there. What if
Yeah.
you're by both? Are you talking about the logical and emotional where you just get overwhelmed? Yeah. And I think for me, I've certainly learned over the years it's letting the chimp in. That emotional side is never going to go away, but it's more about how you try and reframe things or find out the things that do trigger you. So what things trigger your emotions? Be interested to hear. Short, yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth. For me, it's curveballs. When you didn't expect it, then it's last minute things. Jo's laughing because she knows.
Yeah. And I think back to everyone's point as well, like it's making sure that our emotional brain isn't hijacking our logical, rational reasoning and thoughts. So
absolutely.
yeah, we are going to have both sides of these brains, of our brain.
Especially when you're in that conflict moment and you're sharing ideas, but someone's ignoring you, as Ruth said, that can be really triggering. It goes against those values. And then Sharon saying, changing the goalpost. There we go, Ashley agrees with you. And I'm sure there'll be a few people saying that. And then different teams, individuals. Yeah, we're all very different. I think that's what makes the world so interesting. How boring would it be if we were all the same? And as Jo said, if we'd no conflict in the world, things would just bubble under the surface and then I think possibly explode.
Mm.
Yeah, broken promises. Absolutely, Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah. And our triggers quite often link to our core values, right? So Sharon's is a perfect example.
Yeah.
That's part of her kind of core makeup, and somebody going against that.
Yeah. And I think that is, I don't think we realise at times it is our values, but I think as well we have to be aware that just because something's important to us, that other person might have a completely different value as well. And it's really important to keep that at the back of your mind as well. Yeah, trying to keep your cool, Ashley. We don't all have the same knowledge, we don't have the same experience. And I think, yeah, I think we have to keep that right. Okay, walk away, count to 10, do what makes it work for you. And I think the key thing for me, first of all, is identifying the things that are triggering you. So I would take a look into those. Think about your values, because we always find, as Jo said, when we're triggered, it's because someone went against something that's important to us, and that's the things that trigger us. Now, it's important to recognise that during conflict, whether that be just take a time out, just walk away, go walk, or just take a minute, go make a cup of tea, and then focus on using I statements rather than that blame. If you're wanting to express your feelings, say, I feel frustrated when, rather than you always do this, you always do that. So try and focus on those I statements. And for me, try and practice that active listening. So listen first to try and understand the other person's perspective and understand their emotions as well and where they're coming from. Because when we're in that heat of the moment, that can be really hard. And if we understand emotions, we can influence conflict and we can learn to manage these and navigate those disagreements and really reap those rewards of having a more positive aspect of conflict and how we resolve it. Now, there are lots of different benefits of conflict. And if we handle conflict in the right way, it can really have a positive impact on our emotions as well. If we start to challenge that status quo, we can have more innovative approaches to problems. That's when we probably come up with our best ideas. And it's really thinking about it from lots of different perspectives during that disagreement, because teams can make better decisions. And when we think about conflict, yeah, it can expose that weakness that we've maybe had in that plan, but it can lead to those stronger outcomes. And it really is necessary to have that clear and assertive communication. It can be really valuable to practice how you express your needs and actively listen, as I said, to that other person. Now, as we talked about already, conflict can bring those hidden problems to the surface as well. And sometimes by tackling these head on, we really can prevent them from festering more and causing those bigger problems down the line. Now, developing your emotional intelligence is really key, and looking at those conflict resolution skills. It's more about thinking with that mindset. I don't know if you were on the last webinar where we certainly talked about growth mindset. That really does make a difference. And then looking at all the different kind of PQ assessments, and I'm more than happy to share those links in the chat with you as well. Because I think the more you're in that positive mental fitness state, then the more likely you are to be able to be adaptable, consider different perspectives as well. Now, think about emotions like frustrations and anger. They can motivate us to address those problems and seek solutions, or they can encourage us to really advocate for ourselves and others. But we can also start to see it from someone else's perspective and really have that empathy for someone. So it's about understanding their emotions to help us find those solutions as well. Now, conflict often gets a bad rap. If we think about right at the beginning where we were talking about, is it a negative word? Is it a good word? But actually, it can be a really powerful tool for that positive change and growth. So Jo's going to take us through some ways that we can deal with that conflict and handle it effectively.
Yeah, and just as Arlene said, how we handle conflict is absolutely fundamental to whether it's going to be positive or whether it's going to potentially lead to negative outcomes. And just as Arlene said, recognizing our own emotions, being able to recognize the emotions in others, but also being able to control our emotions. So, you know, taking that moment to count to 10, really understanding our own positive intelligence and emotional intelligence, knowing what triggers us and being able to calm that down and use our logical, rational thinking brains is really key to being able to have those really healthy conversations. So, excuse me, let's have a look at how different ways that we can handle conflict and which might be the most effective ways of resolving conflict. Now, there are 5 different ways that we can handle conflict. And the critical thing here, again, is being aware, being self-aware and recognizing which modes we tend to gravitate to, and also understanding which situations, which mode is right for, because there's no right or wrong. It's very situational. So to kick us off understanding the different ways we can handle conflict, I want to pose a situation to you. So imagine that there is a competition that 2 chefs have entered. So two chefs need to create their speciality dish as part of this competition. And both recipes require an orange. Now, the problem is that there is only one orange available. So how might they resolve this conflict? What kind of different options might be there for these 2 chefs? So jump on the chat. What might they do?
This is my favourite activity, Jo. Love this one.
There's always good ideas that come out of
This
it.
is where we challenge you. This is where we have a bit of fun. Oh, right in there, Daniel. Share it, half it. What do we think that is then? Oh, there's a lot of sharing going on here, Jo. So absolutely, sharing it is an option. Now that could be that compromising style that we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. So absolutely, a lot of sharers here.
Agree, sweat together, Sharon saying. What might that look like?
Okay, flip a coin.
Yeah. Absolutely. What other options have we got with this orange?
Oh, there, Ashley. No one wants to share the glory. I don't believe you, Ashley. And I do know Ashley, just in case anyone's wondering.
Could make one recipe, Sharon. Yeah. Unfortunately, the competition rules state
No,
they've got to make a recipe each.
Oh, I like this, Helen. We're starting to think about it now. So what would happen then if we discussed that? What style would that be? How would we be dealing with that conflict, as you like?
What are we likely to gain from that discussion, Helen? Sacrificing, Daniel's saying, yeah, so we could give the orange to the other person. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, Helen's saying they may need different parts. Absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's where we're starting to get to that innovative thinking, Jo. We're starting to really think about how we can solve that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's relate some of these solutions to the orange challenge, to the conflict handling modes. Arlene, if you just flick on to the next slide for me. Thank you. So yeah, we had a number of ideas there. One that didn't come up, which always does actually, is fight for the orange. So a competing style there. So both just jump in and steal the orange, or we literally tussle over the orange. So a competitive style. We might give them the orange. Somebody said that, sacrificing the orange, I think Daniel said. So that is an accommodating style. So when we look at these styles, we have two axes down the bottom. We've got our level of assertiveness. So how clearly and loudly are we going to assert our own wants and needs? And then the bottom one there, how cooperative we are being. So if we're being overly cooperative and not asserting our own needs, then we might decide we're going to give up the orange, right? We give it to the other chef. But actually that isn't taking into account our wants and needs. We could both use something else instead. Ditch the orange. It's fair. Nobody gets the orange. That's an avoiding style. So that's not really recognizing the wants and needs of the other person's feelings and emotions are not really cooperative, but it's also not asserting our own wants and needs. So both of us are losing in that situation. Lots of you said straight away, cut the orange in half. And that would be a compromising style of conflict handling. So really it's okay compromising. We do both get half an orange, but we're not really getting both of our exact wants fulfilled. So we are being mildly cooperative with each other. We're sharing that orange, and yeah, we're being mildly assertive about our own wants and needs. Now, collaborating is really where we want to be in most conflict handling, in most conflict situations. And collaborating is where we get curious about the needs of the other person. We have a conversation about it, exactly what Helen started saying there. And then we discover maybe we need different parts of that orange, and one of us needs the zest, and one of us only needs the juice. So actually there is a real win-win out of that situation. We can both have the orange, we can both use the orange, because actually we need different parts for our recipes. So there are different ways of handling any given situation of conflict. And we will naturally fall into one of these 5 styles. We will have a natural gravitas to one of these styles based on our own personalities. So what I want to do now is explore where our natural style conflicts? Are we more assertive? Are we focused on our own goals and wants and needs? Or are we more cooperative, where we're focused on other people's emotions or goals? So what we're going to do is a self-assessment to understand where we sit on those 5 modes. So if you scan the QR code, so just take a scan on your phone, and it'll get prompted to click Start Course. If you scroll down to take the self-assessment, hit the play button on the
Need to get
conflict
the password in first, you'll mind. The password's Tony05.
Thank you. Yeah, you pop that in the chat. Yeah, so first up, you'll need the password. Once you're into the self-assessment, you'll be prompted to start the course. You can scroll down and hit the play button. And then just simply click on the statements that resonate with you the most. So don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. Just click on the statements that resonate with you the most out of the options you're given.
I've popped the link as well in the chat, Joe, just in case anyone can't get on with a camera. I've just popped the link in there as well.
Yeah, so you can click on the link in the chat.
Anyone needing any help? Have we all managed to get in okay?
Just a shout if anyone needs anything. Password is Tony05. It's just above on the chat. So give us a shout if you're struggling with that at all. Otherwise, we'll give you a few minutes to work through that self-assessment. Like I say, go with your gut. Don't overthink it. Just go with what you naturally think resonates with your style there.
And there will be some worded differently. It's not to trick you, it's just to get your style.
Yeah. Always surprises people how accurate this is.
We should have asked them to guess first, Joe. Guess your style first. See if it is affirmed or not. I must admit, I have had a few surprises lately.
Oh.
In a nice way.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is good.
So in a second, we'll bring up a poll. And once you've got to the end of your self-assessment, it will come out with your preferred style. And then we'll let you pop your preferred style into the poll and we'll see.
Yeah, so what I would do is take a screenshot when you get to the end, just so you've got a record of that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So you've got that there. And then don't worry, we'll tell you what all the different styles mean very soon. And just what I do is give us a thumbs up in the chat when you're finished. Give us an idea of how you're getting on. Let us know if you are finished. Can give you another minute or two if you need it.
And I think the really critical thing here is there's no style that's better than any others. We will naturally gravitate to a style. And it's that self-awareness piece again. It's just understanding what is our natural style and also what style is right for different situations. How can we adapt?
So I've just seen a message from Ruth. So Ruth, I've just popped the link. I've sent it as a direct message to you there. So once you click on it, once you go into it, you will see a play button. So you want to scroll down first of all, and it will say start course. Once it says that, if you scroll down a bit further, and it will say take self-assessment, then it looks like you're going to watch a video, but you're just going to hit the play button, and then that will take you in. Now, it's just different statements. It's not a test, it's just different statements, and you're picking the statements that resonate with you most. Thanks, Emma. So let me know if you get that okay, Ruth.
Yeah, give us a thumbs up in the chat once you're done. And you can come back to this after the session. You save the link and the password. You can revisit it if you need a little bit longer.
I think we'll give it, what, 1 more minute, Jo?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So a few people finished. And please, if you need any help, pop in the chat, pop a message in for me. I'm more than happy to help if you need some help. I hope there's not some people overthinking this. That's a natural reaction, isn't it? Go with the gut instinct. It always works. Go with your initial reaction. Because we overthink. Well, I overthink things.
I do, yeah. Yeah, we got a few.
Getting a flurry of thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So like I said, if you haven't managed to quite complete that, don't worry, you can certainly finish that off after the session. But just as Arlene and me were saying, don't overthink it. Go with your guts. And we've put a poll up. So let's see what mixture of styles we've got. And remember, I said no single style is better than any others. We have natural preferences. So pop in that poll. What was the style that came out top for you?
And can you all see the poll okay?
Yeah, give us a shout if you can't. Lots of answers coming in. There's always a real mix. There's always a real mix of styles.
What's the highest so far, Jo?
Human. It's moving around quite a lot, actually. Avoiding is up there.
Right. Oh.
Compromising.
Always find it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just give you another 30 seconds. Those numbers will start to stabilize, I'm sure.
And just let me know when you want me to share it, Jo.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, well, let's end it now. There's still a few responses coming in, but don't worry if you haven't managed to vote. So exactly as we expected, right? A whole mix of styles. We've got a couple of, competing fairly low there, compromising and accommodating, one of the highest. Avoiding was really high at one point when that poll was live, but it's dropped down a little bit. Pretty even between accommodating, avoiding, collaborating, and compromising. So exactly as we expected, we have a whole mix of styles. We're all different people, and we handle conflict in different ways. The critical thing here, the start of our journey of understanding how we handle conflict is that self-awareness piece. And then consequently, now we understand what our natural style is, let's understand where those situations arise, which style is the right style to use for different situations, because there is no right or wrong. And there will be certain styles will be appropriate for different situations. So let's have a look at that now.
Okay, so what we're going to do is look at competing style first of all. So what I'd like to do is ask you in the chat then, when do you think would be appropriate? When would be the best time to use this competing style in conflict? When might we want to use this?
And remember, competing is being very, very goal orientated. So really asserting our own needs and wants.
Yeah.
Being less cooperative, so less aware of other people's.
I would say uncooperative, Jo.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. So when you need to do something that just has to be done at that standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be when your values are compromised. Yeah. In what way, Beth, did you mean there? I'd be interested to hear in what way you meant. Is it that kind of protecting yourself? Yeah, Ellie, on that key project, working with lots of different people that you just have to agree. So you might have to have that competing style if yours is the way. Yeah, absolutely, Beth. If you think something's wrong or someone's treating, yeah, you just have to compete because you know that's right. Absolutely, Sharon. You've got maybe those limited resources and you don't have a choice. You just have to make that decision and you have to make it quite quickly as well. Now, that is another reason as well. Yeah, you could absolutely be advocating. I love that, Elizabeth. You're advocating on behalf of someone else who the rights aren't met. So lots of different reasons there. So we've just put a few of them up for you. So I think we have to take quick action. It might be, as Sharon said, those resources are limited and you need that manpower. Or it could be that you're just standing up for vital issues, as Elizabeth said there as well. But there is an element of that protecting yourself too. So it's really thinking about, it does lend well, but it's just making sure we use that style in the right situation.
And that's what Beth was getting at, wasn't it? Protecting yourself or
absolutely.
others. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's look at accommodating then. So when would we be more likely to use that accommodating style? So just remember, this is where we are less assertive and more cooperative. So when would this lend to use well?
So for the orange, this is where we just hand it over, you know?
Yep.
We're happy to go without the orange for our recipe. It might ruin it entirely, but we'll give it to the other person.
Yeah, could be that, but it could be something else, Joe. Absolutely, Ellie. That issue's not clear. And it's maybe not important either. So I think that's the key thing. What are you willing to accommodate with? Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. There are lots of different ways you can, and you're absolutely, you're just not fussed. It's almost like you're creating that goodwill. Yeah, Beth, absolutely. The relationship is key, and by valuing that relationship, yeah, you might agree to that just now, but that might be something that's leading to that bigger picture later on down the line as well. And I think that's important to remember. We don't, it can still be different styles you use throughout a whole process. It doesn't have to be the same style the whole way through. It does depend on the situation. Any others? I think this one's making everyone think a bit more. So for me, you can create that goodwill. If you're not really that precious about it, or that decision's not going to really impact you, then it does help with those relationships, as Beth had said. And then it's really just, it can maybe smooth over things in the short term. And it really does help to really think about how you're going to win that later on. So it could be a good strategy to really having those more important decisions made down the line. So it's really thinking about that bigger picture here as well.
Okay, so moving on to avoiding then, what do we think about this one? When do we think avoiding might be a good tactic? So this is where not really asserting our own needs, but not really taking into consideration other people's.
I like what Emma said there, because I think automatically, well, I think when you say avoiding, it's like you're just avoiding it, but it's not. For me, being caught off guard can really be a problem. I really sometimes need that time just to process what I want to say so that I maybe don't react and get that chimp brain coming out.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what you were saying, Arlene, about we might use a variety of these tactics throughout a conflict, throughout a conversation, right? So we might choose to avoid tactically as a tack to, give us a bit of chance to respond in the right way.
Yeah.
Might be that problem Liz was saying, that we know it's going to resolve itself. To avoid problems, absolutely. Kick the can down the road. Yeah, definitely, Sharon. Yeah, absolutely. So avoiding might be a good style to use when we need time to formulate a response. So that is absolutely a critical time when we might choose to use avoiding. when the situation isn't a top priority. Maybe we just don't have the time, or it just isn't top of the agenda right now. It's not the main priority. Again, going back to that relationship piece, accommodating we might use when the relationship is a real priority. Avoiding might be when we think the relationship isn't a priority right now. And I think the challenge with avoiding is it's a short-term solution. I think, it's part of that bigger picture. And just as we were saying as well, it might reduce tension in the short term, give us a little bit more time to get out of our chimp brain and kind of rationalize things in order to move to a more workable solution for everyone. Okay, so moving on then, what about compromising? When do we think this might be a good way to handle our conflict?
Right in the middle, Jo, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So is the relationship. Absolutely, Ellie. Yeah, so it's that real balance, isn't it? In a close team environment, yeah, I agree, Beth. So again, the balance between our wants and needs and other people's.
I love that from Rachel there. When we want people to learn and we're teaching them, yeah, it's a great way for people to reach their full potential and compromising yourself.
Yeah, yeah, paving the way for somebody else. Absolutely. Yeah, so actually saying, yeah, you feel your way is good, but you're understanding the other person's perspectives, right? You're prepared to compromise on their perspectives.
An interesting one from Ruth there. You wouldn't be able to see it because she just sent it to me. So it's when a new change has been introduced. Yeah, because you might not agree with that change, but you might not have a choice either. We know that change is coming, but we have to deal with it. And we go through all different kinds of emotions when there's change. So absolutely that compromising might be that first step.
Yeah. And Sharon saying when you can still get an outcome that is satisfactory. Yeah, absolutely. So compromising is it's not a win-win necessarily, but it's a good second best, I guess. So we might use it if we need to resolve issues of relative importance where we can both sacrifice something. We can use it when we're creating temporary solutions. So sometimes compromising can give us a quicker outcome. All right, so it might not be the absolute kind of gold star outcome or our absolutely desired outcome for both parties, but it's a close second best. So it might be a good temporary solution. Takes us time to find a compromise. And again, that last part there, yeah, when we're dealing with time constraints, compromising can be a good fit. And then the last one, so collaborating. Now, ideally, if we want to deal with conflict in a really positive win-win for both parties, collaborating is where we want to be. And collaborating is where we are very willing and calmly communicate our own needs and wants, but we're also really listening and focused on the other party's feelings and emotions and their needs and wants. And this does take a bit more time. That is the challenge about collaborating, right? It takes a bit more time. It takes depth of conversation to really get to the bottom of our goals and needs and wants and the other people's feelings, our feelings, etc. So but I guess the payoff is when it does take a longer time, it is a really, really good outcome for both parties. So it does improve those long-term relationships. It means both people are absolutely committed and on board with that solution. And it means we've got the best solution integrating both parties' perspectives. So just to recap, those are our 5 conflict handling modes. And as we said, there is no single best conflict handling mode. It will be down to our individual style. And that's why we had a look at what our individual style is. So be aware, first off, of where you naturally gravitate to. And then question yourself. So when you're faced with a situation that feels a little bit uncomfortable for you, feels a little bit like conflict is there. Question where you're naturally gravitating to, maybe even reflect after the situation and think, was that the best approach? Was that the right approach? Have I used that consciously for the right reasons? Or have I done that because that is my natural style and really I'm kind of avoiding conflict, or I'm being over cooperative and suppressing my needs for somebody else's needs? So really think about, be aware of what your own style is, be aware of which styles might be right for the different situations, because there will always be situations where certain styles are right, as we've just seen. And ideally, by understanding those different styles, we can choose the most appropriate one, and we can also work towards that collaboration piece, so that win-win for both parties.
Thanks, Jo. Now, another way that conflict can sometimes arise is maybe we've had to have those challenging conversations. Now, thinking back to that EQ and those conflict handling modes in mind, what I want is to really start to think about what candid or honest conversations might need you to have with your team, or have you had? So if you could pop in the chat for me, which types of challenging conversations might you be faced with, or have you been faced with? So it'd be nice to hear what they are, if you can. Absolutely. One of the most popular ones, the first one we normally hear, is those performance conversations, or absolutely having to really bring to the forefront of that person's behaviour, as well as what is the behaviour you need to change as well. Yeah, people don't like to hear
Love that.
what they're not doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be restructures, could be that huge change again, or feedback. Yeah, how people come across. Personal hygiene, Ruth saying that can be a very difficult conversation, isn't it? When you're managing upwards, there are lots of different scenarios. So what I would like you to think about is just have these in the back of your mind, because what we're going to do is I'm going to give you some tips that help when dealing with those candid conversations or uncomfortable conversations. Now, we use something called the 4 Ps. Now, this can be used in a few different ways. So it could be whether you're addressing that underperformance, as Elle said, or it could be that you've just got a difficult message that you want to communicate to someone. Now, for either situation, using this method really can help get the buy-in from that person. Now, for me, I think there should absolutely be 5 Ps. So the first one I would say is planning. So really taking some time to think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, where you're going to say it in that environment before you even do anything. So think about your position first of all. So before the conversation, really take some time to consider it from their point of view. Now, it's showing that empathy to the challenge they face, and the impact of the situation demonstrates that you care about them. Now, it doesn't mean that you're showing them sympathy or you agree with them. It's just being able to put yourself in their shoes to see it from their perspective. So if it was underperformance at this stage, it's important to think about the reason for that gap. So is it their knowledge? Is it they don't have the right resources? Or is it they're not motivated to do it? Now, really drill down into that root cause before having that conversation. Then think about the problem. So think about all the aspects. So if it is that underperformance, then what's the impact it's had on the brand, the customer, the profit, the team? And then really highlight the why. So why do we need this change? Now, it's important, if you are using this to deliver that difficult message, that we identify the problem and the reasons. So really asking those questions, try and avoid that why word, because that can be quite emotive to people. So can you explain to me? Can you tell me? And really start to get that two-way conversation. Because if we do, then we can look at all the different possible ways that we can resolve the situation, what support you can offer, but also you might be giving them bad news. So it's important that we have those solutions there as well. And it's about remaining positive too. So thinking about what we're going to do to solve the problem moving forward. Again, if you go through these, it demonstrates that empathy and willingness to help them achieve that desired result. Then lastly, thinking about the proposal. So you might have given them different possibilities, but really it's about considering the best options. And it really is important that you've got that two-way conversation to get their buy-in. And they might see a different possibility, but it's really being open to listen and looking at how we can make progress. And then obviously following that up formally, if it is underperformance, just a recap on the conversation as well. Now, another way we can deal with conflict is through that assertive communication, which Jo is going to take us through some top tips for that.
Yeah, and I love those 4Ps because I think it's a really simple way to structure a difficult conversation. So if you're anything like me, I hate having difficult conversations, and I really struggle to kind of start them off. So doing that bit of planning and then following that structure through is a really good way of handling it effectively and calmly. And part of that, as Arlene said, is assertive communication. So we've talked about assertiveness in that in our conflict modes example, but what is assertive communication? So assertiveness is going to be key to handling conflict in a really calm and measured manner. And most of us, again, have a natural communication style or behavior type. And we can look at, again, at the balance between being considerate of others, that people focus down the bottom, or that cooperativeness that we looked at earlier, and communicating or considering our own goals and wants. Now, ideally, we want to handle conflict effectively or handle those difficult conversations effectively. We want to be in that top quadrant where we are calmly and collectively asserting our own goals and wants, but we're also listening and understanding the points of view of the other person. I guess the bit for me that I really struggle with, though, is, and actually Edmund has popped it on the chat there, is what do we do if somebody we are talking to is in one of these other quadrants? So what do we do if we have come across somebody who is aggressive from the start? They're overexerting their own needs. They're not listening to us or our points of view. And really, the simple way to respond to that is just stay calm, set boundaries, focus on facts, and de-escalate it wherever you can. So give them the space sometimes to be aggressive, get their points of view out, and then calmly and assertively say, I'd like to give you my point of view. Thank you for giving me yours. I understand that. I'd like to give you mine. Passive aggressive is where people are not focused on. So often this is really a difficult one to deal with. It can be quite toxic sometimes. So where people aren't focused on the needs of others, but they're also not really focused on the needs, the goals of themselves either. They're just kind of passively aggressively nitpicking, and quite often that comes out very, very negative in the background. So they're being aggressive, but under the radar in a passive way. Call it out. Best way to deal with that situation is call it out. Focus on solutions. And one of the tricky things here is actually don't take it personally, because quite often it can feel very personal. And then lastly, if you've got a very passive person in a conversation, so they are potentially more willing to give you everything that you want. They're very focused on the needs of the people in this situation, but not so much their own goals. And they might be quite quiet in expressing their own wants and needs in this situation. So here we've got to really listen very, very carefully to draw out their feelings, asking great questions, reading their body language, reading between the lines, giving them space as well. So asking questions and then pausing and giving them that space to respond and that opportunity to put forward their wants and needs. What is their goal in this conversation. So some tricky ones there to deal with. So it's a balance between how do we deal with some of those other behaviours and traits when they're coming from the other person, but also how do we stay assertive and calm and clear in our communication. And there's a few tips on that as well for you. And the first one there is something I love, is focus on I statements. And Arlene mentioned this earlier, or just touched on it earlier. So instead of that kind of narrative where we might say, you did this or you said that, and that feels blamey to the other person, right? It feels like we're putting the blame on them. Whereas instead we can use really positive I statements. So clear, calm statements where we start with I. So I feel frustrated. I feel whatever it is. So maybe it is, I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted because it makes it hard for me to finish my thoughts. So rather than saying, you interrupted me, let me finish, you say, I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted. I'd really like to finish my point of view. And that really reduces the defensiveness and balances out the conversation. Avoiding weasel words is another one. Does anyone know what weasel words are? Jump on the chat if you do. It's always a really funny one.
I think it's that language, isn't it, Jo? It's back to that assertiveness. There's a classic. I'll try.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
All those different ones. Yeah. Hopefully.
Absolutely. I could do that.
Or should even.
Yeah. So avoiding our weasel words and using really strong, clear language. So things like will instead of could. So instead of I'll try or I will do that, and want. So this is what we want in this situation, or this is what I want in this situation. And wherever possible, avoiding but. Because, go on, Arlene, sorry.
That's just as bad, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just as bad. It negates anything else you've said prior to that. So it can reduce the clarity and the assertiveness of your message. So try and replace and notice when you've done it. Do a bit of self-reflection. Notice when you're using those weasel words or those buts or sorries, and replacing that but with a so. Yeah. Clearly stating your wants and needs. So yeah, just it's okay to own your wants and your needs and state them really, really clearly. Don't beat around the bush. So an example might be, I'd appreciate it if you could let me finish speaking before responding.
And I think the key thing to remember, Jo, it takes practice, doesn't it? It's not something that just happens, this assertive communication. And I think it's being patient with yourself and giving yourself time, because that's the way you can navigate through that conflict and give yourself confidence, really.
Absolutely. It does take practice. And I think that one of the things that I often use is confident body language. If you can use confident body language, even if you don't feel confident, that will help you feel confident. So even if you start there, and then kind of focus on what you're saying. Active listening, I think, is really important. So really assertive communicators listen really well as much as they do talk. So use of pauses, use of silence, letting the other person speak, and being open to that two-way conversation is really important. So a few tips to help you deal with those challenging conversations there.
Thanks, Jo. I can't believe we're past that time, and apologies, we are a minute over. So we've just got a couple of slides just to kind of summarise and kind of fill you in on what we're doing next. So it was a very quick whistle-stop tour, but we're more than happy to answer any questions at the end, should anyone have any questions for us. But I think for me, what you're going to do next is just as important. So think about understanding that conflict is really critical. Think back to what your mode was and really reflect, as Jo says, and adapt depending on the situation. Because remember, there's no right or wrong style. It's just about adapting and using that style one's most preferred to get that resolution we want. and then think back to that trigger, those emotions, and really think about the things that are important to you and recognize those triggers, because the minute we recognize them, that's when we can start to really make a difference. And then where possible, if it is, use that win-win and that collaborative approach, and then take some time to practice using those assertive communication techniques. Now, we will share the slides with you, we will share the recording, so please don't worry about trying to remember everything. And really, the key thing for me is just, if we have that healthy conflict, we can learn to communicate with that clarity and respect, even when we do disagree. And that can only strengthen those relationships we have and gain that trust too. Now, just before we go, the next webinar is going to be Westy. So he's going to take us through AI. And the way he's going to do that is really thinking about how is it just ready to use. So it's not about, I'm no expert by any means in AI, but it's looking at what can it do for you and what can it do for you right now. So I've popped the link in the chat for you. So the registrations are open, so feel free to register, but I will pop the link again when I send the email to you.